Giles County actually was up here, and as they were up here, their county got hit. So then they had to respond back to their county. So it was just a whirlwind of things, no pun intended. But you had to really focus on, okay, what's my next step? You had to plan ahead. What's the next step? Okay. Um, so once we finally started getting confirmations of, okay, we had two twin babies show up at the command post. Nothing but diapers on, cold and wet.
Hey, everybody, welcome to this special bonus episode of the TIMSA Leadership Podcast. My name's Eric Claus. I am your host. Today, we have a special guest that is joining us. Michael Dunavant is the Director of Maury Regional Medical Center EMS. Michael, thanks for joining us, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Man, we're excited. I wanted to kind of set the stage for everybody about why we're doing this bonus episode. We've never done anything like this before, and we're actually going to be talking about a specific event that impacted your county, Maury Regional area, Maury County, in several counties around, in fact, several states. An event that happened on May 8th, tornado, devastating, impacted you all greatly. And that's what we're going to be talking to you about today. So let's jump right in, Michael. Tell us a little bit about, a summary about that event and why it was so significant.
So we were actually monitoring the weather that day. We knew that some severe weather was coming. We get periodic updates from EMA, from the state, and we thought that it was going to hit later on. So around 4:30, I was headed home. And as I was headed home, I get a phone call from the on-shift supervisor stating that there was large hail and structural collapse in Lewis County, which we also serve. So I turned around. I made my way back to Maury County EOC, which turned out to be fantastic as far as the support. We train all the time with multiple agencies, but to actually be in place ready for an event to happen, and you have all your representatives from first responding agencies at one place was spectacular. You had your EMA chief, you had your Columbia Fire Chief, you had Maury County Fire Chief, you had representatives from the police departments and sheriff's departments, highway departments, and we're monitoring this weather event coming through, and we're watching it on cameras, live cameras from Columbia State, watching this wall cloud come through, looking like it was going to hit dead on downtown Columbia. Really made us a little nervous. We called in extra people. We were already fully staffed that day. On a typical day, we run 9 ALS trucks, 7 of those being 24 hours, 2 being 12 hours. And we had a full BLS unit on that day of 5 trucks. So all in all, we already had several trucks of our own. So it was just a waiting game. We was watching it. As it crossed over in front of the hospital, we was watching the weather cam, and we all kind of got that look like this is fixing to be bad. We put everybody on high alert, especially our outstations. We do have a station that is off of Tom J. Hitch, which is right toward the path that this was going. We were watching multiple weather channels, Tennessee Valley Weather. We had radars up in the EMA, constantly getting updates from storm chasers, spotters, and whatnot. And as it crossed over Highway 50 going to 412 Bear Creek Pike, we watched the camera in front of Columbia Fire Station 3, and we seen it start to spiral, huge wall cloud. And then all of a sudden we see it touch down right in front of us on camera. Blue sparks, power lines. We knew that we didn't know how big it was at the time. We went ahead and activated a response, sending 3 ambulances, supervisor and assistant director toward that location to set up a command post. they were actually behind it, still watching the rotation on the ground. That was a hard part for me, is to sit in a classroom and not be boots on the ground, knowing that that's what I have to do, though, to coordinate the efforts. So we activated the RMCC, activated a Hertz event, contacted Chad Brown, our Region 6 state consultant, and he graciously responded. He actually came to the EOC. So that was around 5:40ish is when it touched down. After that, it was kind of a all hands on deck. The radio traffic was one of the things that we had a hard time getting out. Cell phone service was lost. So trying to get in contact with your boots on the ground and knowing we were getting reports that there were 18 dead, mass casualties everywhere, but we had nothing confirmed. So that was the not knowing part until you had confirmation of exactly what resources you needed, where was our casualty point going to be, what areas were affected. So we start getting information in from other first responders. We had multiple agencies reach out to respond, some self-dispatched. I know Spring Hill was right there. They big assistance, Spring Hill Fire. Williamson County was right there. They were also affected by this. So the response mode was definitely, you had to really make sure you had everything written down, taking notes, make sure you had your people in place. So Jamie Rowan was the on shift supervisor that day, and she did a fantastic job. We set up a command post at Lucia Fire Department, which it hit Lucia area. It was just destruction all the way around. We were getting reports for calls that our ambulances, there's no way they could get down the roadways. So we had some people on foot, and at the command post, they were assigned to task force. There was 5 task force formed off the bat. Our medics and EMTs were assigned to different fire departments or fire responders, and they started the search and rescue point. That's when the phone calls started coming in. Of course, I carry 2 phones. One's my personal phone, one's my business phone, and both of them were going off. We are a big regional hospital. So the hospital CNO and COO, she was contacting me wanting to know, do we activate the code yellow, which is a disaster response. At that point, I told her I had no confirmation of how many casualties or injuries we had. But to be on the safe side, I would go ahead and activate that to be ready. And they did. And, Maury Regional Hospital really showed out that night too. Their staffing was remarkable. During this time, EMS don't stop. You're still running medical calls. You're still running trauma calls. It's not, you can't just say, well, we're working a tornado, we can't come get you. So we were still busy during that time running 911 calls. So the activation response happened. And at that time, nobody said no. All of our crews came in. I can't say enough about the employees of Maury Regional EMS and the staff that we have. They came in, they were assigned to trucks. We split trucks up. We converted BLS trucks to ALS trucks. We had an outpour of response from surrounding areas. We had Vanderbilt trucks come down. We had Williamson trucks respond to calls on the interstate that we couldn't get to. Giles County actually was up here, and as they were up here, their county got hit. So then they had to respond back to their county. So it was just a whirlwind of things, no pun intended. But you had to really focus on, okay, what's my next step? You had to plan ahead. What's the next step? Okay. So once we finally started getting confirmations of, okay, we had 2 twin babies show up at the command post. Nothing but diapers on, cold and wet. Our crews did a phenomenal job of taking care of these patients at their worst time. And then still not knowing what was coming. There was another round of weather that was going to be moving in, and our guys didn't hesitate. They stayed out there all night long. We staffed a truck out there for 24 hours during the recovery phase. So timeline about it. It was shortly after about 6 p.m. We had a confirmation of the 1 fatality, unfortunately. We still could not get to her. The fire department had confirmed that there was the fatality. It took us about an hour and a half to finally get to that location. Um, so tragically, someone did lose their life during this event. We are very fortunate, though, that it was only one fatality and not multiple. The tornado was a half-mile wide and stayed on the ground for 14 miles. So very fortunate, very populated area where it hit. It was just lucky enough the path that it hit stayed just outside the most populated area. So to backtrack a little bit on the time frame, as we said, the RMCC was activated. And for those that don't understand the RMCC, that's your Regional Medical Communication Center, activates you to get your resources that you need. So we found that, it's complicated to be the regional RMCC when it's your area that got hit, because you're dispatching your own stuff and you're also trying to get other resources in. So we learned from that. We've put some measures in place and some training and some education to better ourselves for that in the future. But being with Chad at the RMCC or at the EOC, he's like, man, what do you need? What resources do you need? I'll get it done. So I told him, and the list is so long, I'd hate to leave anybody out, but we had multiple agencies here. And so we started the wind down. Okay. We kind of got through the initial phase. We know how many patients we got. We only transported 3 patients. One was pretty severe, critical, but the rest were pretty stable. So we started a casualty collection point at Lucia Fire Department. We had multiple ambulances staged there, ready to transport out. The other part was to get to there. So that was the difficult part coming from west to east. Bear Creek Pike they shut it down to any through traffic. You couldn't get through there at all. So you had to redirect, okay, which routes am I going to bring people in? Which routes am I taking people out? And then we started the wind down kind of phase. We kind of took a breather. And it's like, all right. And at the EOC, we had this big whiteboard, and highway department was there. All different kind of leaders was there. The mayor of Maury County was there. Several representatives that were there to show support, asking what we needed. So we started the wind down part of it, going through and saying, okay, who can we start letting go back? Because, if we've got their resources, they may need to be back in their own service area. And that's what we did. So we started, releasing the ones that we knew we wasn't going to need anymore. Some were willing to stay. Some absolutely, they'll stay as long as they need to. And big gratitude to all EMS services across the state of Tennessee. I'm proud to be a part of the state of Tennessee EMS because, they showed up when we needed them most. So during the wind down, we kept on extra crews that night. We had extra mattresses and cots and recliners and people willing to stay. We kind of left the EOC. It was about 1:30 in the morning, I think it was. The other severe event that was projected to come through luckily broke apart and did not come through. So went home, got some rest, got up early the next morning, went to Lucia to give those guys a break out there, and stayed out there, did a drive through with some other fire chiefs and stuff, and just looked at the area, and it was just devastating. It was, so much destruction in one little area, and to really let it sink in that your guys are out there in that. So that's dedication. I can't say enough about them.
I drove, which I live in Maury County as well. And I remember driving past the area. You think you know what it's going to look like, but until you see it and you realize, like, wow, this was much different in the feeling of it. And I wanted to ask you, Michael, because I know we got a lot more to talk about the debriefing and so forth, but I want to go back to just to make sure everybody understands that you all were actually watching the tornado touchdown on screen. Like you were getting live feeds of this. So you're watching.
We seen it before the news even seen it. So.
Okay. So you've been in your position how long in the
2 years.
2 years. Okay. So many of the directors that are across our state and even nationally that are listening to this I just want to pause a second and give you an opportunity to share what that experience was like of you watching a tornado come through a populated area and watching the event happen. For us, we respond to events, right? The
Hmm.
damage already happens, but you're seeing it unfold. Tell us about that.
Oh, it was hard. It was very gut wrenching. You just immediately prayed about it, prayed for the safety of the crews responding, prayed for the people in the affected area, and then your mind really has to start thinking, okay, what are we prepared for? Do you have a response plan? Who do we call in? Who in our own team is ready for this? We do exercises. Everybody does surge exercises through the state. You do mass casualty incidents, but until it happens, that's when you know if you're ready for it or not.
What was different, Michael, about the way that you were trained, but actually having to use what it was that you were, the tools that you were trained? Because we've all been in the situations,
Mhm.
meaning we're preparing for an event, but now it's actually happening. This is a nationally, broadcasted event that, the images of Maury County and surrounding counties are being shown all over,
Mhm.
probably the nation, maybe the world, I'm not sure, but kind of walk us through that on,
Sure.
did you remember the training or you were like, oh man, is there a reference book? I'm just curious to
Yeah.
know because
So a lot of it is how often you do train, keeping yourself up to date on and your responses. But is there things we could have done better? Absolutely. Are there things we're going to do better next time? Absolutely.
let's
Uh,
talk
you
about those too.
you you learn through those, and I think that part of that is when you do a tabletop exercise, just like me and you sitting here talking now, you can hear me fine, right? During a live event, we couldn't hear each other. We couldn't get out on radios. We couldn't get cell phones to go through. It was very spotty, very staticky. So that was the difficult part in the initial phase was where do we send people? Where do they need them? Because we couldn't get it out. So that's the biggest difference. The challenge, the hurdle that I seen was when you do these exercises, it's all you've got the perfect channel, you've got everything's on tabletop, or even in a live event, everybody's coordinated. You can say timeout, let's change this up. Well, during an event, you can say timeout to refocus, but there's no changing what's already happened.
How'd you overcome that communication piece, Michael? Because that's something that you almost can't prepare for. You can, but it's real. You got
The communication piece, we had resources that we could have utilized that probably would have helped us a little better. That's one part that we could improve on. It's called a bill box. If we would have had that, that probably would have helped our communications a lot better. Some of the parts that didn't help, there were some towers down. You know, it was mass destruction, as we said. So I think that that's the learning curves, and that's why it's important to do multi-agency training, not just your EMS. You need to be training with your fire departments. You need to be training with your police departments, your EMAs. That way you have that interoperability agencies that you know what to do in those events. EMA knows how many trucks I have on that day. Fire knows how many trucks we have on that day. We know how many first responders, fire trucks, firemen are on. So I think that's an important piece is having that relationships with your other agencies within your region and knowing what resources you have.
yeah, that's huge. Absolutely. Let's talk about the debriefing. So after the event is over, everybody's recovering, they get their rest, you're doing a crew member check. And let's talk about the debriefing part and what it is that you've learned from the event.
So sure. So on May 10th, we had a debriefing. Everything kind of settled down by that point. At that point, it was just the search and rescue part was done. Now we're doing just the recovery phase. So we called in all of our guys that responded that day and that night to do a debrief. We had a big whiteboard and pieces of paper, and everybody wrote down pros and cons. What went good, what went wrong, what can we improve on. Number one at the top, we've already talked about it, communication. That was one of the biggest things that was difficult. Not so much telling each other what to do, but being able to tell each other what to do. So communication was at the top. Um, Secondly, going through making sure when you are requesting resources, go through the proper channels, making sure you're reaching out to the region consultants. If you're going to borrow resources from another region, make sure those consultants are speaking to each other. And then the other part was just training and what equipment do we need? Do you need extra um, service gloves, on the ambulance? Like thick leather gloves. Do you need more safety equipment? What would be appropriate to have in that situation? Is it something you need on a daily thing, or is it something that we could have in a box ready to go?
Yeah, those are huge things that in hindsight you always wish that you could go back and
Hmm.
do things differently. We all do, right? I mean, it's just the nature of the business of being such dynamic situations that we are responding to. Michael, talk us through what advice that you could give for counties in the state that have never had an event like this. We hope that it doesn't happen, but share some of the key nuggets that you think that everybody could benefit from the lessons that you've learned.
Sure. I think one of the biggest things that I've touched on a little bit is having a strategic plan, knowing what activation response you're going to have if that event happens. Make sure you have what crew members, what management teams coming in, who's trained at what level. You utilize your resources of your training people. Even if they're not coming in for EMS response, what if you have an employee or even a person of management that has a tractor or a chainsaw that lives in that area that could clear a path for you? Utilizing your resources, or if they're already in that area and you get a call, and this is a totally made up address, but if you get a call at 123 Whistle Lane and one of your supervisors lives right around the corner, they could first respond and be there, because it's going to take that ambulance a while to get there with the path being blocked. So I think if you have those ways of communications, training, knowing your activation response, we actually come up with an activation plan moving forward, having more training for our supervisors to be able to conduct the RMCC. Um, that was one of our, not really issues, it was complications, is who runs the RMCC and who runs the command post. Um, so we figured that out pretty quickly and adapted and overcame that. But moving forward, we got a better plan, and that is training other people up to be able to perform those duties as RMCC manager.
Yeah, Michael, those are great tips and great advice. And I really appreciate you taking time to
Mm.
share this with everybody today. I know this is going to be helpful. I know that you have received a lot of questions already, but we're hoping that this experience that you shared with us kind of enlightens everybody that this is not just a
No.
tabletop exercise. Like this is real. This is going to happen. And you definitely added a lot of value to us. Any closing words before we sign
Yeah.
off?
And I know I talk a lot about leadership and management and training, but I wouldn't stop there. Encourage this all the way down, from top to bottom across the board. If you don't train every level of employee up to the standard that you need, you're not going to succeed. And that's one thing that we really try to do is create that pathway to show how you get from, we do interns all the way from intern all the way to critical care, community paramedic, supervisor, director level, and what it takes to get there. And during those transitions, that's also when you want everybody to be trained up, not just your leadership. That way, when your boots are on the ground, they know how to respond to that. So I think it's very beneficial and imperative that you train more than once a year. You got to do these exercises, come up with scenarios. Even if you're just doing them on shift, just have your FTOs come up with a scenario and role play it for your crews on shift that day. It makes a big difference. We've had a couple of exercises that I didn't let our guys know was coming up because you don't know when the event's going to happen, and get here and say, all right, surprise, you're going to this event today. So, but it worked out good. And, we were already scheduled that week for a surge exercise, a mule day accident of all things, and we had to cancel it because of the tornado that hit. And we ended up having it in June, and it ended up being really good. It was a tabletop exercise, but it still was very beneficial. We still learned how to do our surge plan and do our EMS call down. That's one of the biggest things that I know that in any region hurts is across the whole state of Tennessee. So, I encourage people to make sure that you're up to date, you know how to do the call downs. That's very beneficial when that event happens.
As a leader, Michael, what do you think is the most valuable life lesson you learned from this event?
I'd probably have to say the respect of all the people that didn't hesitate to respond. Knowing that you surround yourself with good people makes you a better leader. You don't make yourself a leader. It's the people that you surround yourself with and how they respond to you.
Yeah, Michael, thank you so much. Such valuable information that you were able to share. I know this episode is going to be shared with a lot of people across the state, and you're really a model of leadership. And for you taking the time and just to be transparent with us, we're truly grateful. And for those that have joined the podcast today, we're truly grateful, and we appreciate all of the work that you do. And we were just honored to be able to bring this bonus episode to you again. We look forward to visiting with you again soon.